We are extremely, extremely excited to have this gentleman on our podcast. He was just 10 years old when his parents put him on a plane alone to escape Castro's Cuba. That moment didn't just change Ric Prado's life, it defined his life's purpose and mission. Ric went on to become one of the most respected covert warriors in CIA's history. Over a 24-year career, he ran black ops in Latin America, fought terror networks across the globe, and helped build CIA's first unit targeting Osama bin Laden. And around 9/11, he rose to chief of operations at the CIA's Counterterrorism Center, a post equivalent to two-star general, responsible for leading America's shadow wars at the highest level. But Ric never chased headlines, only purpose. His leadership was forged in small, high-trust teams where failure meant death and honor had a cost. Through his best-selling memoir, Black Ops, where he pulls back the curtain on the real world of espionage, sacrifice, and what it means to lead in the dark. It's an incredible book. You have to check it out. From fleeing tyranny at 10 years old to shaping the modern war on terror, Ric Prado has lived his entire life in the arena, and he's still in the fight. Ric Prado, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Ric. Thank you, guys. First and foremost, thank you for your service to this great country. We just wrapped up Memorial Day here, and grateful for you and all those military folks that have served this great country and given their lives and given service. Thank you.
So, Ric, kick us off. Let's just start in the beginning for a second. So, what was back in Cuba? Right. The fact that you had to leave on your own. Can you just paint this picture? Why did your parents have to put you on a plane alone? What was happening at that time, and walk through that in the orphanage and what took place?
Yeah. And you said it earlier. I think that life forges your mettle as you go across and you end up in the path that you're supposed to go to. And I'm a firm believer of that. But mine started pretty early. I lived an idyllic life in a small town. My dad was originally a cowboy. That's where I had a horse before I had a bicycle. And he, when he got married, my mom domesticated him and he became a businessman, started a coffee roasting company. But he was still a cowboy at heart. So I had the idyllic life. I had a BB gun at the age of 6, killed more lizards and, that kind of stuff when I was a kid. But then it changed really quickly. We lived at the foothills of the Escambray Mountains where Che Guevara had his troops. So the town that we were in, Nicaragua, was the first place that they started hitting when they started moving towards Havana. So I literally saw one of the scrimmage fights. I was probably 8 years old and witnessed that literally, 2 or 3 feet away from me, people shooting in front of my house when I was looking through the window. And what was really drastic was a change. Yes, the violence was a shocker because, I saw people get shot and guns going off really 3 feet in front of me. But it was how quickly my world changed. It went from this idyllic childhood to a constricted, contrived, highly manipulative system. I mean, within 3-4 months, I was in uniform. Instead of going just to school, I had to wear a military-like uniform. At the age of 9, they're sending me out to teach campesinos, farmers, illiterate farmers, the ABCs. I'm 9 years old, for God's sake. What can I teach? But it was just that militarization, that brainwashing that started. They confiscated my dad's company 6 months after Castro took over. And shortly thereafter, my dad decided that, we were going to leave. He did not want his son growing in a communist country. So the tipping point, I think, was 2 things. One was Bay of Pigs, which when that failed, broke the hearts of the people that were hoping to put an end to this. The second was the fact that my name at the school that I was at a private school, my name was on the list for the kids that they were recommending to go to Russia and study. So my dad said, that's it. They couldn't get out. My mom and dad couldn't get out. At the time, we all had U.S. visas. We just could not get the exit permits. And That's when we go back to the story that you mentioned, where at the age of 10, they put me on an aircraft to go to. I ended up in a Catholic orphanage in Pueblo, Colorado. And if you think Pueblo is a blue collar town now, you could imagine what it was in 1962. But yeah, it was rough. Again, that was another metal forging opportunity there with a lot of angry kids from different cultures and languages, and all orphans, which makes for a little bit of
Yeah.
tension. But even
How,
that
how did
was, you know,
I would say how did they let you leave? Just because you're a minor, they were okay with you jumping on a plane alone?
yeah, they had a program called Peter Pan, the Pedro Pan program, which was through the Catholic Church. And it was originally created to take out the families of the opposition that they hoped that the United States hoped would remain and be able to democratically somehow, return that the Bay of Pigs. That was it. So Peter Pan made it open to any child whose family wanted to leave, but the parents couldn't. And I
Got it.
think it's 14,000 kids that left under that program, and I was one of them.
What was it like mentally for you? Did you just believe your parents were going to be reunited? What was your mindset like at 10, getting on that plane, leaving them behind?
Yeah, that was quite a growing up posture there really quick. I turned 11 at the orphanage, and I was at the airport, walking through when my mom was crying, and my dad tells me that I said, if mom doesn't stop crying, I ain't going. But I do remember him. He took a knee, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "I will see you again." Um, that was my security blanket through it all. I remember being in the orphanage. I remember kids crying at night. I never cried because deep inside I knew that this was a temporary pain. Uh, and that and again, I was brought up to be the little man, the little cowboy, that's temperament that my dad was a role model for. So he prepared me for that trip. I was pretty prepared for it. It doesn't mean that I don't, have some, probably some damage that came from that somewhere along the line. But I think it all turned out for the positive, because I don't think that I would have been what I was able to become and pay back this wonderful country of ours, which we owed a huge debt of honor.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's
How did it shape? At what age, you know, did you always know you wanted to go military? Like, how did the experience in Cuba shape, and what age did that take form where you started on the path that you ended up on?
well, it's a mix. First of all, obviously, being a rabid anti-communist, because we saw firsthand what it
Yeah.
did to families and to our first country. So with that was always a positive for us. Anybody that was opposing communism, but in high school, you're in high school, you're doing all kinds of stupid stuff, uh, and I think it was my first year of college where all of a sudden I grew a conscience, and there's a little vignette in the book. Um, this is the hippie years. This is like 1971 and early 71. And the hippies posted that they were going to take down the flag the next day and burn it, the American flag. So I was new in college. I had no friends in college, so I had to go back to some of my high school homies and ask them to come over. So when the hippies showed up the following day, try to lower that flag, um, it wasn't a fair fight. Let's put it that way. It was only five of us, 15 of them, but it was not a fair fight. And but here's the tipping point, and this is what I'm really proud of: is at the end of that, I still recall in my eyes looking at that flag waving in a blue field, and it was the first time in my life that I felt, a sense of pride for standing up for something. And 6 months later, I joined the Air Force Pararescue, and as they say, the rest is history.
Amazing.
So in 72, you decided to join. Now, why the Air Force? Why the pararescue? Why'd you want to go Special Forces?
I get that a lot from just about everybody, especially for my special forces and force recon guys. Why did you go pararescue? Look, nobody in my family ever served in any uniform, not even Boy Scouts. So I had no idea. I had never met a military person, other than the martial arts and stuff like that. But that was a lot more sterile. And when I got that bug after that particular incident that I just described, and I started looking around, I happened to be in an oceanography class with a guy who was a former PJ. And he's the one that started telling me, you jump out of planes, you shoot miniguns, you climb mountains, scuba dive. And I was an avid diver. I was starting to be studying to be a professional diver, marine science technician. And that's how I got into pararescue. At the time, to tell you the truth, I did not know. I had been in this country 8 years. And I really didn't know much about Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marine, much less special anything. But that was the tipping point for that. And I will tell you, I thought I was a tough kid, that I thought I was in shape. And I've been in the martial arts since I was 15. Yeah, that was a humbling first 3 weeks in Paris. But I made it.
And where did you do basic?
Basic was a Lackland.
Okay.
And our pipeline at the time was about 14, 15 months. Medical school at Shepherd Air Force Base, that's the first one. Sears School, Scuba School, Jump School. And then at the time was Hill Air Force Base in Ogden, Utah, was what we call the transition school. You went there for 3 or 4 months, and that's where you got your beret at the end of that particular training. It was the culmination of all the stuff, and that was at Hill.
I totally forgot to ask the most important question about what age were you when your parents showed back up and grabbed you at the orphanage?
I was very lucky that my parents came out. They came out about 8 months after I left. It took them about another month to be able to have a place to live and all that other stuff. But it was again a major change, because at least at the orphanage, we had TV, we had other some kind of amenities. They would take us to the rodeos every couple of weeks, which I loved. But we were living sub-poverty. I mean, my dad was loading trucks and mowing lawns. My mom was working in a sweatshop. She did that for over a decade. It was. I think that was one of the roughest periods. And you guys have all mentioned it. At the age of 10, being put on a plane. But listen, the best thing that ever happened to Ric Prado was that.
Right.
Okay. And the price was paid by my parents. Because imagine if you have kids, but having a single kid, I'm an only child, and you're going to put that kid on an airplane at age 10 to a country that you've never even been in. That takes fortitude. And it's funny, when our oldest son turned 10, I looked at Carmen and said, "Do you think we would have the stones to put him on a plane to go?" And she said, "Over my dead body." Yeah.
Yeah, that had to be torture. I can't even imagine.
Very rough.
Well, take us through your career. So, your parents came, and they obviously sacrificed a ton for you, and we're grateful that they did that. But take us through kind of the years, and then kind of build us up to when you were in Nicaragua, and beyond that, when you went to the farm, I believe in 1984, et cetera. Take us through that.
And Rick, don't skip, because I love everybody's story of how they got recruited in. So when you get to that part, I'd love to hear how you got into the CIA originally.
And I know humility is always something that I'm sure you practice. This is not the place for that. We want to hear the good stuff.
I believe in modesty anyway, and I've lived I've walked in the shadows of giants for so many years in my profession, that if that doesn't keep it humble, nothing does. Yeah. No, I went into pararescue in December of 71, into the pipeline, into basic training and everything else. I did 2 years active duty. My dream was to go to Vietnam. I wanted to serve, which of course really irked my parents, because my draft number was off the charts. They were never going to, and I volunteer. And not until later in life did I realize that why they were pissed off, because they were going to lose their kid again. I'd never focused on that at the time, So but by 73, when I got my beret, the Vietnam War was winding down. I was at Homestead. I was having a blast. I was jumping 2 or 3 times a week. I was doing scuba diving. But I had no purpose. I wasn't making a difference. So that's the first time I applied to the agency was in 74 when I got out of the reserves. And I became a paramedic with Miami Metro in the 70s in Miami. I became a really good paramedic. Now, I was cowboy country at the time with the drugs and the Colombians and the Cubans and Mariel and all that. But I stayed in the reserves with pararescue. And then in 1980, I had switched over to, actually in 76, I left pararescue and I went to National Guard, Army Special Forces, 20th Group, 20th Special Forces Group. I never went through the Q course. I got, I was I never got my Green Beret, but I was pararescueman. And I reapplied. I applied in 74. They told me, no thanks. We're actually firing, not hiring. As you know from history, the post-Vietnam years where attrition in the military and the agency and the community was severe. But in 1980, I applied again. And by then, my medical creds as a paramedic were pretty decent. And so they hired me on contract. And John was asking, how did I get in? My life has always been backdoor, man. It's just, everybody goes through this door, I go through the window kind of thing. And this is one of those cases. They asked me if I wanted to work contract as a medic for Special Activities Division Ground Branch, which is the Special Operations Forces for CIA, draws all the personnel from the SOF community. So for me, heck yeah, even though it was contract. So I did that for a few months. And then when Reagan came into power, the first thing he did was declare war on communism, especially in our hemisphere. And to show you the level of attrition that was at the agency, they had some great paramilitary guys, but they didn't have anybody who was a native Spanish speaker. And they had plenty of Spanish speaker guys, but they did not have the paramilitary background. So that's how I got recruited to go staff with the agency, because they didn't have a single, Spanish speaking guy that could pull off going into a denied area. And here's the thing, the title of the book is Black Ops for that reason, because Black Ops are those operations that we have to do where the American hand has to be hidden. That is the whole concept. It's covert action. It's not the aftermath of things. So that was my entry into the agency, was through that. They called me on a Thursday. I was at headquarters on a Monday, and I was in Honduras 3 weeks later. No training other than some briefings. Alias docs. I was there as Major Alex Mendez. The Hondurans were actually backstopped me. They gave me ID that I was a major in their intel. And first 14 months of that program, I was the only CIA officer allowed to go to the camps because, again, the hidden hand. I did that a total of a little over 3 years, sleeping in a jungle hammock Monday through Friday, coming home to my sweet wife on the weekends. And it was the best job I ever had.
So what were you doing? So what were some of the things you were doing back then when you were in Honduras?
It's more like, what wasn't I doing? I mean, especially when I was the sole guy there, all the training, headspace and time. When they get 50 cals for base, I had to learn how to, headspace and timing on a 50 cal. I got really good with shooting RPGs because I had to teach in 10 different camps. And then every time somebody came in that they needed a demo, it was like, call Alex, Major Alex, and he'll demo the. So it was training. It was networking with them, teaching them patrolling, teaching them communications, bringing in the gear that they needed, bringing in the doctors. Like I said, after 14 months, then we got 3 former Green Beret contractors that came in, and I still did the camps 2 a week. That was my pattern, was 2 camps a week and then come home for the weekend. But now in 3 of the key camps, we actually had a more permanent presence. By the time I left, when I was there, we were 5 when we started. By the time I left in early '84, we were probably 70 people, and it grew to be the largest station that the CIA had at the time after I left. So,
I was just going to ask about Honduras or down in Nicaragua. So did you spend time there?
Well, I mean, I lived at the border, and
Yeah.
it's not like here they you go through and says entering Georgia, or the border there is very very porous. There were times when we were literally 300-400 yards from a Sandinista encampment. So we got in a couple of scraps while I was there. Nothing major, nothing like Iraq, but when people are shooting at you, they're shooting at you, and when you shoot back, you shoot back. So that was it was such an important period for me. And again, as I got older and when I had a little more time for introspection, I realized that the charm of that tour was that now I'm 30 years old. Not only am I a Cuban that's in CIA, but I am helping these guys and gals fight the
Right.
same monster that destroyed my family in my first country.
Yeah.
So that gratification, because now I look back and I go, you did 3 years sleeping in a jungle hammock? I wouldn't do that now for anybody. But back then, I never got up one morning and said, "Oh man, I wish I wasn't here." On the
Yeah.
contrary, it
And I
was.
think parents have no clue, right? Because at this point, you're in ground branch. So for all they know, they don't know where you're at. You can't be honest with what you're doing. And this pride you have in fighting communism on the front lines, like you are, right? You're having to sort of swallow that internally.
Yep, it was a black op. My parents, they the story I told them was that I was DOD, that I was the Department of which made sense to them. They said, yeah, he's been jumping out of airplanes forever and all that. So that was the more plausible. I think that the first time they started getting an inkling is when I got after the farm, and I became a State Department diplomat. And I gave my mom. My mom was a big Reagan fan, and my accreditation to the State Department was signed by Reagan. And so it was that was on my mom's wall forever. She loved that. That's what they started realizing. You know, this guy is up to a little bit more. And eventually, once I was out of cover per se, I was still in the outfit, but they knew I was agency. Just they didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
And even my wife. I mean, my wife, until she read the book, she knows 80% more about what I did now than that I ever, you know,
Yeah.
got her into.
Amazing. How long did post Honduras was it till you got to the farm? What was
I
that?
had a year to finish my college. I had 2 years of college. I needed a 4-year degree, so I did. Went to George Mason University, graduated, with distinction. But I had to do it in a year because that's all they could sponsor you for legally. So I got my degree in a year, and then I went to the farm for my master's in espionage.
What was the most interesting thing that you could share about the farm experience and that training compared to what you'd already had and everything else?
It was. I think it was another turning point in my life. Now, when I was in high school, I worked at a clothing store, a nice men's haberdashery, so I knew how to dress up. But after 3 years in the jungle, I was a blunt object, and all of a sudden, here I'm supposed to be a diplomat. So there was a little bit of polishing that needed to be there, but I loved it. It's a very intense course. At the time, it was, I don't know, 4 to 5 months, and you're immersed. You are immersed in another country, and you have classroom training, and then you have all the other, realistic training. You have a real embassy with a real station, and communications and surveillance and all this kind of stuff. So it was very very intense. But when you love what you're doing, it's not that rough.
Yeah.
Finishing school with Christians in Action, CIA. Yeah.
Or cash in advance, whichever you want.
Or yeah, there you go. There you go.
So post farm, do you now go on? Are you still on the ground branch operative side, or are you now on the intelligence side? Like, how did you go from there to being chief of operations at CDC?
Yeah, I mean, I came in at a very opportune time where the Special Activities Division ground branch were looked upon by most of the agency as the meat eaters, the snake eaters, the knuckle draggers, this kind of stuff. That was changing. They started saying you could not be a paramilitary officer unless you're a case officer. And I remember the first time I heard it, the guy said, "You're not in the Central Airborne Agency. You're in Central Intelligence Agency." So we all had to eventually, the guys that just wanted to teach people how to shoot and do that kind of crap, eventually they were weeded out and became a very professionalized, to the fact that we've had DDOs, that Director of Operations for the whole agency, who were home base in SAC now. So that was my home base for the first 10 years of my career. But I was doing case officer work. I was just doing it in places where the average college kid wasn't going to go and survive, and thrive in. So, yeah.
And what was the coming from your background in Cuba, in experiencing America the way you did, right? Was the CIA like? Did you have any preconceptions of what this was going to be like, and then compared to what it was? Because I love the stuff that you write about and talk about, how the misconceptions, how Hollywood sort of portrays it, what all of us consume, and sort of what it sort of was in the reality for you. Like, love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, John, that's a very, very important point. And as a matter of fact, it's the reason behind the book. Again, another conscious crisis was when I realized that a third of the stars that we have on our wall of honor are post 9/11. And several of the people there, Jennifer Matthews, Mike Spann, among many others, are people that I was part of sending them into harm's way. And I felt that the widows of our warfighters needed to have something to put in front of their kids that said, "This is what mommy or daddy did during the war." That was the whole purpose of the book, was to talk about realistic CIA operations. They're all sexy. You read the book. There's a lot of good action, a lot of good stuff there, but it's not like in the movies. And not only the agency, because agencies don't have a conscience or a memory. It's the people in it. It's the fact that we have an incredible amount of unsung heroes, men and women with high educations, great talents, that decide, instead of becoming a lawyer and a millionaire, they're going to go into the agency and be bouncing around the world every 2 or 3 years and pulling their kids out of school and all the stuff that goes with that. So, yeah.
So let me double click on that. So Jennifer Matthews. So for people that have watched Oh Dark 30, and you remember, you and your team, you found this doctor, and he was either in Jordan or Qatar, and you thought you could kind of work with this individual, and you thought he might be able to turn and point you in the direction of either what did you call them, the messenger, or the individual who gave information to between KSM and then also bin Laden, right? But that individual ended up sharing that, and then you can maybe go through. It was just a tragedy. What happened? They didn't really check the car, and what happened there? Just maybe a behind the scenes look at it, because probably a lot of people have seen that. We lost the most CIA officers at that time during that trip to Afghanistan, right? It was a CIA base, correct?
It was a CIA base in Khost. Jennifer Matthews worked for me in 1996 when I started the bin Laden task force with Mike Scheuer.
Wow.
Mike Scheuer, senior analyst and the chief of station. I was the deputy chief of station and senior ops guy. So I knew Jennifer from that time, and she was always a pit bull. She is one of those original analysts who get infected with ops and become targeting officers, and they're the scariest thing in the world, especially a female targeting officer. You're done, because they're going to hunt you down. And so she was very good at what she did. Mike Spann I met later, met him in the gym a few times, and then when he deployed. But in the case of Jennifer, she was extremely knowledgeable on anything that was bin Laden. I mean, she was a plank owner of the bin Laden task force, and that's all she did for the rest of her career until she died, until she was murdered. But the sad thing is that they put her in a position where success would have been very, very difficult. Okay. You have a person who's an analyst. Her only overseas tour was London. Um, she wasn't prepared for a place like Khost. At the time, Khost was the most dangerous place in Afghanistan. And well, this individual, and again, like 9/11, anybody thinks that we're fighting camel jockeys? No, there are plenty of smart people that are trying to kill us. So it's not just like 9/11. This was a planned operation. This guy fainted to be, and the Jordanians recruited him, and he started saying the right things, and they actually gave him a lot of information that was validated, and thus his credibility grew and grew and grew. Um, and then, of course, the security mistakes that were made. Where I've been to Iraq 3 times. You don't go into one of our compounds without going through 3 different checkpoints, and the first one is the local nationals. So if anybody's going to get blown up, it's the people from that country, not us. Well, all that was bypassed because of that over enthusiasm of making this guy feel well. That this could be the key. I can understand all that, but I can't accept it because as an operations officer, there's certain things you just don't do. You don't go to a meeting without doing a 2-hour surveillance detection route because eventually you're going to get compromised. There's certain things you just don't do, and that's one of them. The guy did come in through all the checkpoints without being checked, and when he got out, not only how many people were killed, but how many people were wounded, traumatized because of that experience. So it was a very dark moment in the agency for all of us. I was out of the agency when this happened. I was no longer in CIA, but obviously it had only been a year or two since I had left, so I still had a lot of connectivity and was doing a lot of things for the building. But yeah, she left behind 3 wonderful kids, and tough story.
Was it tough to leave the CIA when we still really hadn't had satisfaction of dealing with really the head guy that that planned 9/11, Osama bin Laden? Was it hard to leave without sort of work undone?
It was hard, and I actually had to really steel myself mentally to dig the jump. But what happened was, and you'll see it at the end of the book, I created these very specialized programs for going after these individuals. We were kicking the crap out of them in Afghanistan, and but I noticed that they were in third, second, and first world countries walking around with impunity. So I gave up the chief of ops job to go to these programs. So I went from managing 300 operators to a team of 12. Including 4 analysts. So it was we had a lot of successes. We were able to find and fix a lot of the bad guys we were looking for. But every time it came to the pointy end stuff, they would shut us down. And after the second time that we were, you figure I actually briefed the vice president of the United States on this program. And
and at that time was Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice was in the room.
Yep.
They both shook my hand and said, "Thank you and your team for what you're going to do, because this is what we want you to do." So I'm working on these recruiting cream of the crop. The people that I had on my team were just incredible, and all based on the enthusiasm that, hey, I got the blessing from the White House. This is a go. But after almost 2 years of finding and fixing and coming up with all kinds of great scenarios, they kept shutting us down. And the tipping point for me was this really, really, really bad guy, again, associated with bin Laden and everything else, but he was a big fish. And we had a fantastic plan. We had worked on this guy for 3 or 4 months. We knew what he had for breakfast when he was in the target country that we were in. And I was briefing the DDI, the DCI. The DDO was there. Jim Pavitt, Tennant was the DDI. The DCI. And I remember at the end of my briefing that Pavitt said, "Sir, Mr. Director," says, "there's no doubt in our minds that Prado and his team can not only do this, but get away with it." And I'm ready to jump up and do high fives, right? And then he said, "But we have to look at the political ramifications of doing this. And that's when I came to the realization that you cannot run special military or intelligence operations through a political optic. Politics has no place in operations. I was brokenhearted. I came out of that meeting, went to see Jose, was the chief of CTC then. By then, he had replaced Kofer. And,
so Jose, so Jose actually, Rodriguez, who is very famous, he replaced Kofer Black, who stood up at 9/11 and said, "Give me the ball," and say, we'll go find this guy, and we'll go bring them to justice, right?
Yeah. And Jose followed suit with the same enthusiasm. But I came down and I told him, I said, "Look, boss, this is the third time that they shoot me down. I can't do that to my team. These were every single operator I had in that team, and every single analyst made senior grade in the agency. I had the cream of the crop, including Mogadishu vet and all this kind of stuff. There weren't just case officers. These people were wedded, and it was heartbreaking for me. But I've always.
But Rick, just so we're clear on what we're talking about here, sorry to interrupt you. You're going to go into a bad place, and you're going to go remove a problem. That's what you wanted to do. You were going to be the tip of the spear, and at the end of the day, they wouldn't allow you to do that.
The program was actually a very robust intelligence collection based on all source intelligence and surveillance, which we did ourselves. We operated. Nobody knew what country we were in. We had no access to embassies. We had nothing. It was all, like being a non-official cover.
Off the books.
Yeah. And the program, the idea was to identify. Okay, so the genesis for this was because of my Bin Laden experience, and then what I suffered being chief of ops in CTC. I came in 4 months before 9/11 or 5 months before 9/11, watching the amount of chatter and indications. We knew we were going to get hit. We knew that it was going to be in the United States. We just didn't know how or when, or imagine that it could be something as sophisticated as it was. So from that painful lesson, I came up with the idea that we need to be able to preempt and disrupt, which are the mottos of the CTC, by the way. The idea that I came up with, and it was blessed by the vice president, was you give me 3 really bad guys in first, second, and third world countries, not in war theaters. We're not going parachuting after anybody. That's not our job. And we will make book on them. We will do the find, the fix, and come up with 2 or 3 scenarios by which we could neutralize these individuals. We could compromise them. One of the operations that they shot down was literally, I was going to put inert explosives in this guy's car because I already had the keys to his car. That's how aggressive we were against these. And then have somebody in the local language call in. I said, "This guy made me bring this up. I feel guilty." And we were going to taint the steering wheel with C4 and the door handle, so he had this crap all over him. That was a compromise. They didn't go for that. The second one was a rendition. We call them duct taping operations. So that was the other, which is the hardest because you're trying to take 180 pounds of unwilling flesh out of a country. Right. And the third was the final option, which would have been just to shoot some of these guys. So this wasn't a hit team. This was an intelligence collection based on surveillance with teeth. The same guys and gals that were doing the surveillance were going to do the operations. And we were trained both in the hard skills and in the soft skills to do so.
Did you work with the teams? Did you work with any of the teams, the operating teams, so SEALs, the Berets, or any of that stuff?
I led every single team.
Yeah.
When I retired, I got some pretty robust medals, but the biggest badge of honor was when Jose, who was my host, said, "Rick is the only guy I know that could be asked to put a team to go to hell, and he would have people lined up out the door." That was the biggest compliment for me because that's the way that I always sell. My guys used to tell me, "You can't go do this. You're a general. You're a boss." I go, "Bullshit. I will never ask you to do anything that you haven't
That I
seen.
won't do. Yeah.
I was the first guy.
That's leadership, by the way. That's leadership in anything.
Well, that's what does the word leadership mean? It's you
Yeah.
lead. You don't manage. A
Yeah.
lot of people manage. And so anyway, that was innate in me, and it's something that I learned from the Dewey Claridges and the and the Ray Doty's that I worked under, that were just bigger than life individuals, and that was the ethos that I was forged under.
So Rick, I have a line of questioning here. So with your the folks that you really looked up to. So we all need individuals that take an interest in our careers, people we look up to, role models, etc. So when you look at that, what did you learn? Who are some of your role models and what did they teach you? What did you observe? And by the way, we could apply this to business, sports, faith, charity, etc. And you being in elite squads where people basically have to decommit from everything in their life and commit to what you're doing here in these teams, which is incredible. What did you learn? And who are they?
I think I only had one boss very temporarily who was an Alpha Hotel. But I was blessed with just great leaders. The first gentleman named Ray Doty, one of these underachievers, he was 17 when he jumped into Corregidor, went to Special Forces, got recruited by the agency, was one of our main guys in Laos with William Buckley and a couple of other badasses. My first boss in the agency. My wife adored Ray Doty. Bear of a man, just smart. And, I tell this to parents all the time. I said, I've learned that kids do what they see you do, not what you tell them to do. And it's the same thing with leadership. You could tell me, well, here's a well-planned thing, go ahead and execute. You don't have the credibility if you don't yourself. So Ray was that kind of guy. Joe Fernandez, when I went to do the Southern Front out of Costa Rica, which here you go from being in a paramilitary environment, 2 grenades, guns, knives, and now you're in coat and tie doing a semi-French resistance kind of existence. And Joe Fernandez, who you probably heard of, who was part of the Ollie North clique, I learned a lot from him because, again, every time I came in with some harebrained idea, he would sit down, grab a yellow pad, light a cigarette, because back then you could smoke inside of government buildings, and he would draw a line down the middle and put pros and cons. And to this day, when I have hard decisions to make, I get a yellow pad. I don't smoke cigarettes. I smoke cigars, and I'll go through that list. So Joe was another one that was very influential.
And did he get pulled into the Iran-Contra?
Yes, he did. Well, he was kicked out of the agency, pretty much destroyed. I mean, they took his career away.
Did he get a part? Did he get a pardon?
He eventually got a pardon, and as a matter of fact, I was at the event where they reinstated him back into the agency. He got his pension, got his
great
stuff, but the damage was done. I mean, the damage was done because he could have been DDO. He was that smart. Former
as they did with Ollie North, right?
Yeah, same very similar thing.
He took the bullet for everybody involved.
That's right. And and we understand that part of it. I was dragged into the grand jury at the age of the grade of 12. I was a GS-12 in front of the grand jury because of the Iran-Contra thing.
Wow.
The beauty was that I wasn't a subject. I was, just a witness. So I could say whatever the hell I wanted to, which was the truth. And that they told me that it helped them tremendously because you don't argue with the guy who was on the ground when this stuff was happening. And it was that individual. So yeah, that whole episode. So, Joe was another one. I think probably be my longest and most notorious was Dewey Claridge, the legendary Dewey Claridge.
Tell us about Dewey. Tell us a little bit about his career and who he was, and then we can get into what you learned from him.
Quintessential gentleman spy.
Okay.
Brioni suits with a matching handkerchief and smoking, $10 cigars. I mean, he was just a bigger than life individual, but he had brass, he was fearless. So when I first met him, I was a GS-11, I think. or GS-10. I was a GS-10. And they called me out of the camp. So they said, Ray wants you to come back, and we have some people that want to talk to you. So I packed my shirt, go back to Tegucigalpa, go to the base, and there's Dewey Claridge. Well, what I didn't know was that him and Bill Casey, who was our DCI, had just flown in the night before. And so Dewey introduces himself, and he's there with his, starched chinos, and he's got the right vest, and he's got a gun on him because he doesn't go anywhere without a gun.
He's straight out of Ian Fleming.
He's straight out of Ian Fleming. As a matter of fact, I used to kid him. I say, boss, you remind me of the good version of Emilio Largo, who was because he was that, he had that panache, and how he carried himself. So Dewey says to me, he says, you're going to meet our director of the agency. I'm a GS-10. I am going to meet the director of the agency. And here's why. Because I was the only guy in the camps. And the first words out of Bill Casey's mouth were, so you're the guy that's sending me all those good photographs. Because that was my hobby. I would take pictures of everything that was going on, the poverty, what we needed. And, and he says, you keep them coming because I keep those photos on my desk. And every time some liberal starts trying to shut me down, I beat him over the head with those photos. So keep them coming. So that was my, and after that, I forgot about Dewey. I mean, he would see me in the halls. Hey, Alex, because he still remembered me as Alex. Yeah. Hey, Alex, how you doing? Then, eventually Rick. So we became friends. He was, as you know, probably from your own research, he's the guy that created the Counterterrorism Center in 1986. That was his contraption. And like I said, he was just a class act all around. I worked with him post agency almost till the day that he went into a home and subsequently passed. He actually asked me a lot of programs that he was running with our special military, and he asked me to take those over, and I did for.
What did you learn from him?
Again, you learn things like really standing up for your people. You could not take a hit if you were working for Dewey Claridge. As a matter of fact, when I was leaving Honduras, my tour was over, Ray Doty went to Ground Branch and said, we need to keep Prado. We need to sponsor him for college and send him to spy school. And they said, oh, yeah, don't worry about it. We'll take care of him. Well, Ray Doty didn't go for that. So he picked up the phone and he called Dewey Claridge, who at the time I think was Chief LA or something, and told him the story. What I heard back was that Dewey called Ground Branch and said, you got 24 hours to sponsor Rick for university, or I am putting him in Latin America and he'll be in school the next day. So that's how I got. That is priceless. How do you let go?
You take care of your people. You take care of them. You love them, and you take care of them.
Yeah. You have to. If not, you're not a leader. You're a manager.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
What was
Go ahead, John.
With these, and for those people who might not know, if you expand on this, but I'd love for you to share something specific. But with Ground Branch in these operations, you hit on it earlier, it's not like a SEAL team rolling in with the full weight of the Navy behind them into an operation. These are smaller units that are off book. Nobody knows they're there. Nobody's supposed to know they're there. They don't have the support mechanisms, and you guys are getting into the thick of it without that kind of cover. I'd love for you to share what is some of the hardest, darkest, scariest moments in your operational career, and what was that like? If you could share it with us, and how did it shape you, and what the takeaway was for you overcoming that?
Yeah, I was blessed with being at the right place at the right time, or the wrong place at the right time. I don't know how you want to put it, but I think the first one obviously was the first time I got shot at in the camps, because now you're with the Contras, you're the only gringo there, and they maybe imagined that I was a gringo, but they couldn't prove it, and so we had a couple of those scrimmages, and that's an attention getter. The first time that you get shot at and you have to shoot back, and I don't miss often, so it was a pretty quick fight. But from there, just things like the headquarters came in with with an idea. They said, you guys are doing a lot of damage to the Sandinistas, but it's small stuff. It's ambushes and raids, and you're taking a little territory here. We need a left hook. We need something that tells them that there's bigger forces than just a bunch of ragtag, guerrillas. So, being an avid diver and I'm a Navy certified diver. I recruited 6 Mosquito Indians who were lobster divers, and I came up with the idea of blowing up Puerto Cabezas port, which was at the time the belly button for all the military material coming in from Soviet Union via Cuba was going into Puerto Cabezas. So I came up with that idea. I said, look, you give me a bomb big enough, I'll blow that crap up. I'll train these guys. 6 where the guys that started, 2 didn't make it. They just didn't have what it took. The other 4 were hard as woodpecker lips, so they were good to go almost from the beginning. And they gave me an 80-pound 80 pounds of C4 charge that we swam into the water, and my guys did the last 500 yards or something. Because again, as an American, it would have been a completely different story if we got compromised. I would have been with them, but I wasn't in the Panga with them. We went in a PT boat, and that was the first really big left hook that happened. And there was no fear there. I mean, when you're operational, you sweated the details. You put all that shit aside. You get nervous before, and you may look back afterwards and go, "Holy moly!" But when you're in the thick of things, you focus, and that this is, you got to lead. You got to carry on. If my guys would have seen me in fear, but they didn't. They saw me jump in the water with them, and put the device on their Panga, that kind of stuff. So that was a big one. We had a related issue afterwards where they tried to do the same thing in Corinto, which was on the other side of Nicaragua. And I was overruled because I said, I don't want my divers doing this. Can they do it? Yes. But they have to have their own boat captains because they don't Spaniards, as they call them. Well, I was overwritten by the hires because they said, no, the FDN needs to put that on their mantle, not just the Mosquitoes doing this. And it became a complete goat rope. The boats broke down. But anyway, that was kind of hairy because I went back to Leon was my base chief, one of the best bosses. I went back to Leon and I said, I ain't leaving my guys out there. They were both boats were stranded in Nicaragua. And I said, I ain't leaving my guys in there. So the first boat was literally in the middle of the Gulf of Fonseca in Nicaraguan waters, just bobbing like a cork. And again, being a PJ, water pickups and low and slows and helo cast, that's all I knew how to do. So I rigged a Huey with 6 ropes that became seats, like we call them stabo, rig to get people out. And the deal was I was going to jump into the water. I'd had a toolkit. I had 5 gallons of fuel, 5 gallons of water, and 2 pounds of C4, 2 sticks of C4. Because if I couldn't leave that boat behind. That was an armored boat. It had, so that was the first rescue in Nicaraguan waters. And I got my guys out. We were able to start the boat and go back. We went back out that same night, still no sleep. I'm on my 36 hours without sleep, and we go in to find the second boat. And that's when the Sandinistas were waiting for them. And that got kind of hairy because, I had an AR-15 and a Browning. That ain't going to get you very far when these guys are doing recon by fire and popping flares. But we found the boat, and then the next morning we had a group of it was like a Navy component called the Piranhas, and these were fast boats with 50 cows on them. We had like 6 of them, and we were hiding the fact that we were going in there. Went in, grabbed the boat, pulled everybody out, and so those were hairy moments, or very early on. But I never saw them as that. Later on in life, you look back and you go, wow, that was kind of hairy. But at the moment, you were just doing, what you had to do. And I think mentality that I think that's what creates our guys.
When you think back at those times, and like you said, when you're leading people, you're responsible for people. That's one thing that helps you, right? Focusing more on them than you, which I think is a huge critical piece. The adrenaline's going, all that. Mentally, when you look back, was there anything that was keeping you focused? Because I think we all go through life, and you get in these situations in life and relationships and business, and you think you're in the heat of battle. When we talk to you, and you're like this is real deal stakes. You got bullets and bombs and all this stuff going on, and you're responsible.
Yeah, you make a mistake, you're dead. That's a very different situation.
Totally different. So, talk about the mental part. I'm just curious, was there something that you would tap into internally, mentally, that on top of those other layers that were also, working, you were leveraging? But what is it that is there anything you were doing that you look back on, you may not have realized you're doing in the moment, or thinking, telling yourself, or focusing on that, helped you, say, yeah, I think we may all die right now, but I can't think of that. What was happening in your head?
First and foremost, you have to be a believer. You have to believe 100% in what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that for me was so easy because, again, having lived what I lived and saw my parents go through, and, bad guys are bad guys. There's only one way of dealing with them, and that's to go after them. So I had that going for me. But, that's the ethos of the people that gravitate to that kind of work. You've got kids that could go be lawyers and be making six figures right out of college, and they end up at the agency as a GS-10, going overseas. And, not everything in our business is kinetic, but I have sat in a car with a terrorist at 10 o'clock at night by myself, debriefing the son of a bitch in places where these guys were killing and targeting Americans. Was I scared? I never was scared. I was always prepared. And again, I had the conviction. I was a firm believer in what I was doing. And after a while, you build the confidence that, I was wired for this. And a lot of people ask me the psychological postures and stuff like that. And I can't really pinpoint it because, like I said at the beginning, I think my life, God started forging my sword when I was 8 years old, even before because of my dad. And that just kept me focused. I was always a dreamer. I was an avid reader. So for me, all this OSS stuff and Jacques Cousteau stuff, that was my dream, to do that kind of stuff. So I think the mental state is you just get better at it, but you have to have the basic, formation to develop that, and the leaders that point you in the right direction. I didn't go to any of these meetings without sitting down with the chief of station or the deputy chief of station and sweating the details about the meeting. You're going to carry a body armor. You're going to carry a radio. What's your surveillance detection route? What's your 911? What is this? What are you going to do if this happens? So that is part of the preparation, is part of the grooming. In the agency, one thing that is very unique about the agency is you go through the farm and you come out and you think you are Mario Andretti. You just went through high school driver's ed, right? So now you go to a station and 90% of our careers are on the job training. First tour officer, every time you go take a piss, you have to go and say, well, I'm going to go to the bathroom and I'm going to lift the lid. They make you sweat the details of everything you're doing. And they would ask you questions that you had not thought of because you don't have the experience. But that builds it up and that gets you going. So I think that my mental state, a lot of it was innate and part of my upbringing, but it wasn't uncommon. I mean, I met so many kids because we were all kids. Let's face it. I'm 7 years old. I look back at age 30. I go, man, you're a kid. These people have the same conviction. They're doing God's work, working 8 hours at an embassy as the visa clerk, and then going out at night meeting agents or recruiting agents. And it's a very ungrateful and demanding mistress. And if you're looking for accolades, you're going into the wrong organization because now the other side of that coin, though, is I think that is one of the things that keeps us tight because we can only talk about our successes and failures among our peers. So I think that there's a cohesion that comes from that. And from that. Um, I've mentored a lot of young officers that all had even bigger careers than mine. Let's pass it, pay it forward.
Yeah.
Love that. John, do you have some other questions? I've got some rapid fires I want to end with, but I'll let you keep going.
One or two more quick ones, and we'll get the rapid fire. But what are you doing now after living this life, right? Like what are you doing now, and what's life like, and how do you keep it interesting? And do you even have a desire to keep it interesting, or is the simple what you crave?
I think the simple is probably the biggest thing. You know what, I call my book My Last Firefight. I had decided that once I wrote the book, that was it, because I was operational until 2 years before I wrote the book, and the book came out in 2002. I thought it was in 2022, and after that, the promotion of the book has been the biggest thing. As of 4 or 5 months ago, the book had already sold 95,000 units. But a lot of that is through individuals like yourselves, getting my message out there and helping me spread the good news and break the rumors. So with the promotion was harder than writing the book, because I've done, as you know yourself said, quite a few podcasts here and there and interviews and Fox and all that. But it's come to the point where I want to have time to chase my wife around the house, ride my horse, go hunting, go spoil my grandkid. My grandkid at the age of 1.5 learned how to play in the mud, because that's what grandparents do, right? So I have I have hobbies. I love working out. I still work out. I stay in fairly decent shape. But it's come a time where I don't mind mentoring. I don't mind these kind of things. I enjoy, because again, you're helping me spread a word that was very important to me. I never, ever, ever thought I was going to write a book. It never crossed my mind until it happened. So I'm pretty much chilling. My wife and I will watch TV till midnight, and I get up at 7:30 and have my breakfast, and just enjoying that peace and quiet. I got plenty to dream back on that I don't need. Don't get me wrong. If I'm called tomorrow, I'll be the first guy there. But there's plenty of young talent that has come before that. So yeah, I'm primarily
taking. You deserve the peace and quiet and family time. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall watching your wife and kids read the book and see what her hubby and Daryl dad had spent his life doing all those years, and the reaction to all those stories. That would have to be amazing.
The worst was my daughter, because she's the oldest of the kids, and she would call me, like every 10 pages, Dad, I'm so glad you didn't tell me that this was going on. I said, of course I couldn't tell you what's going on, So, but as I said, they all serve in their own ways, and they're contributing, and they have a very similar mindset that I'm very, very proud of. Yeah.
Awesome. Justin, fire away.
Okay. So it's graduation season. So if we invited you to, I went to DePaul University. So if we asked you to give the Keystone speech at graduation, what advice would you give the graduates, today's students? What would you give them based upon your love of the country, how to be successful, how to give back?
I think the biggest thing that I would tell them, find something that really floats your boat. I don't care if you're a doctor. My kids, what they were taught from childhood was you could be a doctor doing nothing but boobs and butts in Hollywood and drive a Ferrari, and that's great. That's the American dream. But once a year, you get on an airplane and you go to Honduras and you fix kids with cleft palates, or burn victims and bomb victims in Cambodia, and that's how you contribute. So it's not a matter of being G.I. Joe. It's a matter that everybody has to contribute.
Yeah.
But choosing your profession, you have to believe in what you're doing. Don't go into a job that you got to come out in the mornings when you get out of bed and go, oh, no, I got to go to work. I have been blessed with the fact that even to this day, when I have a podcast to do, I'm up for it, because I still believe in trying to make a difference. So I think that's the biggest drum that I would beat. The other one, obviously, is travel the world and see how good we have it. I honestly believe that the biggest problem we have in this country is we don't know how good we have it because we have nothing to compare it to. I did because I saw, my wife did because she saw and lived it. But the average American, when they go to Mexico, they go to Cancun. They don't go to, the hairy, and
Yep.
even when they go to Mexico City, they stay at the five-star Hilton and they're there for a week. There is no place like the United States, and that includes Europe, Asia. I've been everywhere. So, pride in your country has to be important because you have to contribute in whatever form it is. Like I said, you could be a lawyer, represent somebody pro bono that needs it. I was actually blessed with that when the Iran Contra thing came out. I got called into the front office and they told me, "You better get a lawyer because you're getting dragged into this." Well, I was a GS-12. So I went home. I told my wife, "Start buying tuna because that's all we're going to be able to afford until." And lo and behold, magically an envelope appeared on my desk with the name of this very prominent Jay Ziles. I'll never forget him. Hope he's still alive. And this guy called me in, stopped everything he was doing, and he represented me pro bono. And I never forgot that. And when I went to thank him, he looked at me. He said something that I never forgot. He said, Rick, yeah, I know that I told you could buy me dinner, and I know that I paid for the dinner, and I broke my word. But you got to understand, you saw my office. He says, you know how many scumbags I have to represent to keep that office open? He said, you're good for my soul. I never forgot those words.
Love
Never.
that.
I think that's great. Ric, you're clearly a patriot. You've been a great leader. You lead from the front and in the foxhole with your folks. A great role model for today's executive, for today's parents, for today's children, whatever age, and clearly a life learner. You love life. You learn it every day. You're an avid reader, which leads me to, what are you reading today? What would you advise us to read? I've got a 200 book suggestions that I just can't get to, but I love to read. So what are you reading today that's got you excited?
I have them stacked on my night table. There's some long-term ones that obviously, I love anything that's OSS, anything that's history. I'm a big proponent of educating yourself in our roots and everything that goes with it. There's some spiritual things. There's a writer called Pablo Coelho who wrote The Alchemist, but he's got a book called The Warrior of the Light. And The Warrior of the Light has sat in my night table for 20 years because every night I read a page before I go to bed. It's like a Bible. He's a Christian, but it is not a religious, it's a spiritual kind of thing that puts you in the frame of mind, but it's always focusing on the fact that no matter what your fight is in life, your fight is something you got to believe in and you got to stand up and have the courage to do it. And, talks about failure. Every person that has worked for me has gotten that book when they've earned it, because I'm a firm believer. But, I don't read novels. I listen to them when I'm doing my power walk. Jack Carr is one of my favorites. We've become friends. Great stuff. Marty Strong has got another one. It's got a couple of really good series on SEAL team stuff. But I like history. I read everything. I mean, if we're going to travel to a country, I start digging into what we're going to be doing and what was the history there. And there's no shortage of magazines and books in my house.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. What advice do you have the current administration and Congress and President Trump? What advice do you have on, intelligence, CIA, FBI, law enforcement? What advice would you have? Where should we be going?
We need to get back to our roots, especially with the agency. The OSS is the mantle that we were built on.
And tell us more about that, the OSS. So
OSS, exactly. That's our roots for us and all our special operations community.
Yeah.
The current DCI said something to Congress that I found so refreshing, because he quoted Wild Bill Donovan on the kind of person that he wanted in the agency, and he said, "Look,
Bill Donovan is the founder of the CIA, right?
he is the OSS under
Yeah.
him gave the CIA a couple of years after the war. The the main thing is you have to have men and women who and his quote was, we are looking for men and women with master's degrees who can win a bar fight." And that's profound because you have to have the brains, you have to have the polish, fit in whatever cover you're doing, whether it's labor or a politician or a diplomat. Those are all important things for you to do. So yeah, I would say bring us back to the OSS days. Do the cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war. We are supposed to be an elite organization. Let us be elite. Don't politicize whatever we're doing, and then that builds loyalty. That's for the agency writ large, and some of the other agencies too. I think there's a couple of topics that are dear to my heart. One of us, of course, is the problem that we've had until recently with immigration. I am an immigrant. I came to this country legally. We need immigration, and I tell everybody, yes, fixing the borders are a big deal. It's one of the highest priorities. However, we also have to lighten up our procedures for getting into the country legally. Because for any country that I served in, visa line was always 2-3 blocks long. People trying to get out, and it would take them a decade to get to. So that's one of the advices. Obviously, anything that's communism and anything that's terrorism needs to be faced with force and with backbone, because we're dealing with predators. The Iranians are Persians. The Russians are Cossacks and Vikings, and the Chinese have been an imperial power since before Christ, thousands of years before Christ.
Right. Yep.
So they only understand one thing, just like narco traffickers. They're only afraid of somebody who fights harder. And I have a sticker in my car and in my truck that nobody knows what it is, but it's Si vis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. And that's the posture that we need to have with the world. We have to be respected. We have to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
We cannot keep screwing over as our allies like what we did in Afghanistan. Also in Afghanistan, the people that we left behind, the materials that we left behind. So that whole illegal immigration and making it legal is a big deal for me in fighting those kind of bad guys. Last but definitely not least, and obviously there's a very personal angle from here, is the Cuba situation. People, don't understand that what's going on in Cuba is 60 some years of oppression and poverty. It's the only, probably other than Haiti, it's one of the few countries in this hemisphere that has regressed rather than grown into anything. And but that's the moral part and my roots part. But the biggest part is you're talking about a dagger 90 miles from our soft underbelly. And the level of Chinese presence and their intercept capabilities and their hacking capabilities, and the same thing with the Russians. We have to do something about having that near in our backyard. We're so worried about what's going here and there, and we have to. I mean, we are the world leader, and we have to take that responsible. But I think Cuba is one of those places that really needs to be focused in, because it will always be a dagger that can strike, and they're not beyond it.
What do you think that the solution is for Cuba? If you had the magic wand, if you had the power to do it, how would you fix Cuba?
Well, first of all, you have to get rid of the current administration that is there. I'm hoping that when Raul Castro finally croaks, because he's already in he's like 90 or something, that there may be some opening. I think that one of the things that I like about President Trump is that most presidents go with a carrot and carry a soft stick. He comes in with a stick and then offers you a carrot, and that works because that's what these kind of people understand. And for me, I don't see any movement on Cuba. There may be, but I don't have any access to that. But it is so important for us to take these international negotiations that we're doing and bringing Cuba into the negotiating table and give them ultimatums. And the ultimatums are, you think you have an embargo now? You haven't seen anything yet. Or, hey, you want tourism to really flourish? We'll help you build it. We'll, this, that, and the other. But you got to have a pathway.
But there are strings attached.
Well, I have to be. Of course they are.
100%. 100%. Well, you mentioned it, so I'm gonna rapid fire on some other things. How do we fix the narcos in Mexico? How would you clean that up?
Kick them. Go after them. Look. That's all they understand. I don't remember who was Dewey, one of my bosses, and this topic came up, and I said, look, my ideal, I would pick up the phone and I would call the head of the cartel, blah blah blah, and say, Pablo, here's the deal. I'm going to give you $500 million for you to stop bringing drugs into the United States. But if you don't, there's going to be consequences. And Pablo's going to say, screw you, man. Okay, you're done. I will level every plantation that you have for drugs. I will, go after every single one. And then I will call the next guy and do the same thing. And he may be stupid enough to say, screw you. But by the third guy, going like, we're going to take this stuff somewhere else. So, that's all they understand. We have to have the enforcement. Our law enforcement agencies are so handcuffed in this country.
Yeah.
One of our LEOs, I'm a member of our FOP, all that good stuff. But we need to protect them. We need to give them the authorities to be respected again and to be able to enforce the things that we need enforced.
Amen.
So that
Amen.
To me, it's you got to, I have a thing in my mantle back home that has a baseball on it and says, sometimes you have to play hardball. And I'm a firm believer in that. There's some things that you could do diplomatically, but predators only understand an animal that will bite you harder. And we can do that and still be honorable and still be moral about what we do.
Well, I was talking to an ex-military guy over the weekend, and we were talking. He brought this subject up, and it's been interesting to me. Like literally, if you make a deal with Mexico as a part of the tariffs, et cetera, and said, look, we're gonna be great partners, but we are going to introduce. We have the greatest intelligence department in the world. Mossad may argue with that, but we would argue that. And but say we're going to let them loose, and we're going to bring in our operators, and we're going to wipe them. We're going to turn everything they own into a parking lot, and we're going to put strings attached, and we're going to create a safer world by doing that. I mean, if you had the green light to go do that, you could get that done, couldn't you?
Sure, you sure can. And and you don't have to be that intrusive because once you start hurting them, they will understand that they need to find, and they'll find different ways. Organized crime has existed since I'm immemorial. But when they see that you're pushing back and you see the difference, and that's our border. I mean, it's bad enough when it's Colombia; they still have to get it to a transshipment point, but that's in our border. And what they're doing to us with fentanyl, if that justify us playing hardball, nothing will. And every kid is dying out there every single day because of our lack of aggressiveness against this kind of enemy. That's immoral.
There's a fentanyl epidemic in this country, and we need to wake up to that. So I'm glad you said that.
Rick, why?
I will give you one little
already. I'm because I think this is the conversation we have. A lot of people like, we know we have the power, right? I think everybody believes you believe it. Well, how come we just haven't said, all right, enough's enough, done? Like, what's stopping the forces, or what are the forces that be that are preventing this from happening already, from us stepping in?
It's politics. It's politics. It's the the special interest groups that control so much of what goes on, and this is why I mentioned it earlier. You cannot do these kind of operations if you're looking at a political optic. You have to be saying, what's good for my country? What is going to make the United States survive? What's going to keep my kids from falling into that kind of threat of fentanyl or terrorism? You have to. The world has been what it is since ever. Genghis Khan. That we go back centuries of that kind of threat. We're still living it. But in every single episode, whether it was the Nazis, somebody came across and stood up to the threat and defeated it. And I think we need to be, as the world leader, we have to have the testicular fortitude to do that, and the backbone. And politics have to be pro-America in our survival.
Well, you've got President Pardo, so Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo, well educated, a reformer, a very strong leader. You would think that we would be able to connect on that, work through the tariff stuff, and then let's get a secure border. Let's make it easy. We do need immigrants. Like, this is a big country. We got to run this country. We need more people because our population is, people aren't having as many babies anymore. So the way this thing works is through immigration. But I agree with you on that. Let me ask one other question. So, why did it take us so long to find Bin Laden? What did we not have the commitment? Did we not have the intel? We got caught off guard. I just watched the manhunt for Osama bin Laden on Netflix, the 3-part episode. I know you just saw it too. It's fabulous. Some of your old friends are in there. Kofor Black's in there. God, I loved what he said. Don Rumsfeld, is. By the way, I love President George W. Bush. I got to go see him here locally in Delray and spend some time with him for a few hours with just a few people. And he's one of my favorites, and what guts he had. But when Don Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said, it's going to take us, a year to come up with a plan, and your buddy, Mr. Black, said, you know what? I'll figure out how to get this thing done in a week. and he was volunteering you, brother. You were right there underneath him. So tell us, kind of give us behind the scenes look at frustration. And I know you're Jose Rodriguez is a good friend of yours. And give us fascinating. Give us your thoughts on that.
Well, I do speak with a little bit of authority because, like I said, I started the Bin Laden task force. And the first point that I like to make, which goes back to even the last thing we were talking about, is about, pulling the trigger on things. In 1996, January 96, when we started the Bin Laden task force, we had 2 files on Bin Laden. By 1997, we had a shelf full of files, all sourced, blah, blah, blah. We knew what we were doing. He was in Khartoum. He was extremely accessible. One of my heroes / mentors / friends, Billy Waugh, the legendary Green Beret CIA guy, he had done some surveillance on Bin Laden for a couple of years. We knew where he was at. If we would have been allowed to neutralize Bin Laden in 1998, it's like shooting Hitler before that World War II kind of stuff. Politics kept kicking in. No, we don't have enough proof. We had every liaison service telling us what was going on. We had overhead of building the camp. We had the walk-ins and the volunteers and the recruitment, and we never pulled the trigger on him. And so that stuck in my craw. And when it came to 9/11 itself, that was the genesis for me to start other things that were more aggressive, because we cannot afford to have that. Now, once he went back to Afghanistan, this is where the misconception for a lot of people comes. People go, well, how couldn't you find him? And the example that I give them is, I'm a pararescueman. I have been on searches in the United States, in the Rockies, looking for people that wanted to be found, and we couldn't find them. And that's in our territory with our technology. Now transfer that to a place like Afghanistan, where nobody likes us, everybody protects them or fears them, and you don't have the resources, you don't have the manpower. The effort was it never waned. And the proof is that eventually, we got them. And by the way, very, very proud note, the unit that got bin Laden and identified him, and you saw it in the series, that was the very same unit that we started in 1996. As a matter of fact, 2 or 3 of the ladies that speak in that program were our targeting officers in our shop. So, that hits close to home.
Was that under President George H.W. Bush when we decided we didn't have enough, or was that in President Clinton's? Yeah.
Bush, of course, walked in, and 9/11 happened shortly thereafter. And like I said, I did meet Vice President Cheney and Condi, but the only president that I've ever met was Bush when he came over on 17 September to sign the lethal finding to go after bin Laden. And photograph in my office of him signing my baseball that already had his father's signature on it. Buzzy Kromgar, another one of my mentors, laughing, saying, "Leave it to a Cuban to bring a baseball to a presidential function." I totally agree with you. I mean, I don't think the camera or the media ever did him justice. He was the power and the energy and the fortitude that he emanates out of him was singular. I mean, it was incredible to be in his presence. And having, like I said, I'll send you a photo. I'll send you a copy of that photo because it's actually
Please do. I have a photo with him as well. So send that to me. I would love that. Listen, nobody's perfect, but to deal with what he had to deal with in unprecedented situation, like there wasn't a playbook for that. I mean, the closest thing we probably had was Pearl Harbor, right? I mean, and that was a completely different situation, and we're fighting a completely different enemy that you couldn't see. They were hiding in the shadows, as you say. So, I take my cap off to him and the entire administration, and you're in the agency, because the remarkable thing is, knock on wood, we have not had a major terror. I mean, if you would have said that back in 2011 or back in 01, said, okay, we're going to fast forward 24 years and we're not going to have another situation like this, no one would have taken that bet.
Without a doubt. And let me tell you, I can't discuss, but I know of dozens and dozens of enemy missions that were neutralized and never made it to the headlines. Or
it has to. Yeah, well, I mean, they weren't going to quit. They weren't going to quit. So kudos to you. And that's incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does the cloud of 9/11 still carry to the current generation that's at the agency right now? Like, in the decade and probably 2 after, it was still current in the driving. Is enough people gone through there that's still driving force and still remembered, or is it in the rearview mirror a little bit?
I mean, it is recognized. I don't know if it's, if you didn't live it, and again, it's been 25 years. So a lot of those kids that are 35 years old were 10 when that happened, and they may not even remember the fact. But it is indeed, it was a turning point. We had 3 ground branch guys who had left and were making 6 figures in the private sector that came back to me in CTC, and they said, "We'll come back as GS-12s, just let us back in." And we did. And they had careers after that. So that it was a formative change that a lot of people kind of like signed up and buckled up and did what needed to be done. I just hope it doesn't take that again for us to prevent something, because our job is to preempt and disrupt.
Yeah.
Well, Ric, what an amazing talk. What an amazing man. You were, thank you. I've so enjoyed this, and we hope we'll get to see you maybe on maybe catching some fish, or maybe hunting some deer here and maybe drinking some of your bourbon. And once again, your book is fabulous. I'm reading it now. Black Ops, the life of a CIA shadow warrior, and it is fascinating. It reads like a novel.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Ric, thank you so much. And thanks to your wife also for her service. 45 years. You guys have been together while you're in the service. I can't even imagine. That's a true testament to you guys. And
thanks to Miss Carmen. You bet.
Yeah, exactly. And Four Branches bourbon too. Ric's it's military vets, and a bunch of the proceeds go to that. So try that out too. And Black Ops. But Ric, thank you so much, man. We'll hopefully be talking to you again soon. Thank you for everything.
Look forward to it, guys.
Thank you.